Seltzer Kings.
Podcasts.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Hi, pod friends. It's me, Dave. Yeah, when you hear my voice like this, you know what's coming at you. It's a rerun. With a summer series behind us and a whole bunch of empty spaces to fill between now and the Spooktacular in October, kind of busy. So I'm taking this week off to do a little work on that and, not have to research and write a new show. But I'm bringing you this one from March of 2024. It's about the Heaven's Gate cult. It's a great one, and I think you're going to enjoy it because, hey, if you haven't heard it, it's new to you. Oh, please do not try to tell me England doesn't have cults. I saw your entire country line up to stare at an old, dead, rich white lady. Ass.
The following podcast contains
tobacco, swear words, and, yes, alcohol.
Explicit language.
Hello and welcome to the podcast that asks a simple question. When you wanted me to do that to myself down there, what the hell were you thinking? I'm your host, Dave Bledsoe, and this is episode number 442, which brings us back to... Go! And it's part 1 of Packing a Purple Shroud, and we're talking about Heaven's Gate, which ascended to the next level 26 years ago the week this comes out. Stay tuned. What the Hell Are You Thinking podcast is brought to you by the Temple of Dave Ascendant, who wants you to know Dave thinks well of you. At Dave Ascendant, we believe in 2 fundamental truths. Dave's an alright guy, and you should never do anything he does. A lot of new religions will tell you they know the universal truth. At Dave Ascendant, we tell you not to listen to any of them, even Dave, especially Dave. Just buy Dave a drink and get on with your life. No commandments, no funny clothes, no compounds in the desert, just buying Dave a shot of Jameson and then fucking right off to whatever it is you were doing in the first place. The Temple of Dave Ascendant. We may not save your soul, but hey, at least you get to keep your dick and balls.
It started, I think, with the Heaven's Gate people. That was the first sign that there was something desperately wrong in our culture. When 39 Americans killed themselves in a mansion. In a mansion! You don't kill yourselves in a mansion, you kill yourself in a shitty apartment like I live in. And they killed themselves in order to get to a mothership that was conveniently located out of sight behind the Hale-Bopp comet. 39 Americans. And they were collected by a guy who went around the country in the early 70s, and nobody stopped him. He said that his name was Bo, and he introduced his partner at these meetings that he had, and he said her name was Peep. That is exactly, this is in the public record. I couldn't even think this up. Okay? This is too good. He said to these people, my name is Bo, this is Peep. If I'm at a meeting, and a guy says, my name's Bo, this is Peep, guess what? End of meeting. We have nothing to discuss. I'm out of there, unless, of course, they're sheep. And if Peep is dressed properly, well, I'll stay around quite some time. How do we get to the mothership, Bo? What do? Well, we don't drink, we don't smoke, we don't do drugs, we don't have sex. Well, you have to kill me now. You've taken away all 4 food groups, I'm fucked. He actually told them if they wanted to continue to have sex that they should be castrated. 7 castrated themselves. I always thought that all of us had a little small voice of survival somewhere. I would think that would be the deal breaker. When you find yourself in the bathroom holding a weed whacker in your pecker. I believe that a little voice should go off, hey, I don't think this is the group we should join. Maybe we should try a bowling team.
The long-term listeners of this show,
2 of them, that's all,
know my views on religion pretty well.
Yeah, he's not a fan.
I mean, I grew up with 2 very religious parents, and I want to be clear, they were not weird about their religion. For their generation, and given it was the South, they were both pretty normal about the God stuff. Like there was never any snakes or laying on of hands at any of the services they took me to. I mean, maybe they did that shit on a Wednesday night.
Guess this week is church on Sunday and Wednesday.
But I was always allowed to stay home. But on Sundays, it was all pretty normal church stuff. A lot of singing, shouting. My dad would turn red, stomp around in the aisles, praising Jesus at the top of his voice.
Pretty standard, really.
To their credit, they didn't push me to go to church once I got old enough to express my desire to not want to go. They very much regret that part now. And when I hit my early 20s, I went through something of a crisis over faith.
She broke your heart?
Who, Faith? No, God, no. She was a sweet girl. She was a stripper I met in El Paso. I'm talking about spiritual faith. I knew that I didn't believe what my parents believed, but I thought...
You gotta believe something, you know?
And I kind of went on a vision quest to find my religion. I sampled most of the bigger faiths, or Methodists, Episcopalians, or Presbyterians, and then I turned my eyes towards the Eastern religions.
I'm Buddha. You're Bubba.
I'm Buddha now. All I gotta do is change 2 letters on my belt. Bubba, Buddha.
None of them really seemed to work for me. Catholicism was never on the menu. I could get away with being an atheist, but if I came home Catholic, my mother was going to disown me.
We are not going to have this in our house.
For a very short period of time, I got big into pagan religions. Now, this was before pagans became synonymous with Nazis. You see, back in the 90s, there was this active internet Wiccan community where people pretended they were witches.
Wicca good and love the earth and women power, and I'll be over here.
This was appealing to me not because I believed in the moon goddess or the power of white magic or any of that other bullshit, but because a lot of really hot, spooky women were into Wicca, and I heard that sometimes Wiccan rituals were performed what they called skyclad.
She ain't got no clothes on.
And if I went to one, I was going to see some boobs. But, you know, as an ethical philosophy for life, seeing boobs seemed to be a little hollow. And eventually, I realized that what I believed in was...
There's nothing, nada, zip.
And all of this religious stuff just wasn't my bag. Which is good, because if you mess around too much in religion, you might wind up cutting your own dick off.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Yeah, well, religion does funny things to people sometimes. Which brings us to this week's topic, because this was the week in 1997 that America was first shocked and then subsequently highly amused that 39 members of a religious cult had committed suicide in order to rendezvous with a UFO hiding behind the Hale-Bopp comet.
That was not funny. Not funny, dude.
And yet, we were laughing. And yet, I'm still going to make jokes about it. So there we are. This week, I'm going to tell you the backstory behind the cult, and next week, I'm going to tell you how America took an objectively sad story and turned it into a punchline.
God bless America.
Before I can tell you about Marshall Applewhite and his band of believers, I need to set the stage for the kind of place America was when he got the band together.
I just think you love the sound of your own voice.
Clearly, I love the sound of my own voice. I do a podcast. Weird-ass religions are as American as apple pie and the oppression of minorities for financial gain. This is a country that experienced not one, not two Great Awakenings, but 4 of them. Now, there's a convincing argument made that we are currently in the midst of the 5th Great Awakening, except this time it isn't a spiritual message of peace, but a bunch of pissed off white people replacing religion with politics.
'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA.
However, in this case, I'm specifically speaking of the 4th Great Awakening, which actually is still debated in academic circles. But you know what? I'm not an academic.
You wouldn't let me join with you, you black falling bastards!
So I am going to say that it existed. The 4th Great Awakening took place in the late 1960s and the early 1970s, and this is its Wikipedia summary. Quote, whether or not they constitute an awakening, many changes did take place. The mainline Protestant churches weakened sharply in both membership and influence, while the most conservative religious denominations, such as the Southern Baptist, grew rapidly in numbers, spread across the United States, had grave internal theological battles and schisms, and became politically powerful. Other evangelical and fundamentalist denominations also expanded rapidly. At the same time, secularism grew dramatically, and the more conservative churches saw themselves as battling secularism in terms of issues such as LGBT rights, abortion, and creationism. Many new religious movements emerged, such as the People's Temple and Heaven's Gate, and the corresponding rise of the anti-cult movement, unquote. By the end of the 1960s, America was in a very different place than it had been a decade earlier. And a lot of people took one look around and reacted, I would say, rather poorly.
I don't like it one bit.
As in any time of great social upheaval, there was the inevitable backlash, and in this case, it came in the form of a certain subset of people getting big into religion. The overwhelming majority of them went into conservative sects where the teachings of Jesus were,
They're more like guidelines anyway.
particularly when it came to things like loving your neighbor or blessing the meek. But for a small percentage, that still leaves a pretty big number of actual people. They gravitated into alternative religions. These alternative religions met the definition of the word cult in this standard way, meaning they worship a different kind of fake shit than the fake shit worshipped by mainstream religion. You had your bigger cults, the Hare Krishnas, the Children of God, even the People's Temple. But smaller cults exploded in the 70s with people embracing any number of crazy-ass ideas, coalescing around a charismatic leader who took all their money and had sex with them.
It's nice work when you can get it.
The vast majority of these groups lived fast, died young, and their members eventually moved on to other silly bullshit or just got old enough to understand that not wearing shoes and having lots of sex while people watched and chanted didn't really pay the bills. But for a very few of these groups, they continued long after most Americans had given up, took a bath, voted for Reagan, got jobs, and got on with the serious business of capitalism, which was and is the one true religion of this dumb country. It was into this febrile environment that one Marshall Herf Applewhite...
I'm sorry, what?
Herf. It's his actual middle name. I mean, people in his youth just called him Herf.
What does that word even mean, huh?
Well, the internet tells me that it was a term coined in the 90s during the cigar boom. See episode number 421 to learn all about that.
That's a plug.
And it described a group of people that gathered together for the purpose of smoking cigars. But I suspect that the origin of this term did not apply to Mr. Applewhite. Herf had the profound misfortune to be born into a world where he could not be who he truly was.
Aliens from another planet.
Sadly, no. The people in his youth probably could have accepted that about him rather than what he actually was. And what he actually was
Gay? No, he's not gay.
Well, he was at least bisexual. And from what I can tell, Herf was primarily down with the dudes. Herf was born in Spur, Texas, a town that in 2024 has a Dollar General and an Alpha's convenience store. And when they wrote the song Deep in the Heart of Texas, they were thinking about Spur. Lubbock is the nearest big city, and if you have ever been to Lubbock, which I have, you will know that it is neither big nor a city. In 1931, when Herf was born, the son of a Presbyterian minister, you can imagine that poor Herf had zero chance to explore anything in his identity that was outside of the norms.
Bury it deep.
He attended college, earning a bachelor's degree in philosophy. He married, had 2 children, and planned on attending divinity school with the intentions of becoming a minister like his dad, even though everybody who knew him didn't think that he was actually all that religious.
That's someone trying to convince himself of something.
Early in his studies, he left theology and began studying music. Herf was said to have a beautiful baritone voice and was an accomplished musician with a love of Handel. Drafted in 1954, he served in Europe and afterwards came home to attend the University of Colorado, where he studied musical theater.
Ah, there it is.
After a brief attempt trying to make it into the Broadway stage, which ended, sadly, like so many other men's careers in this unforgiving town.
I'm going to start a podcast that has no focus.
Okay, first of all, fuck you, Gavin. That was mean. And second of all, we have a focus. Admittedly, it took us 5 years to find it, but we have one now. Where was I? Oh, right. We're talking about Herf. After not making it here, Herf went nowhere. I mean, geographically. He was teaching music at the University of Alabama, where he was well-liked, popular with students, and said to be a good teacher. But you see, Herf had needs.
Oh, I think I see where this is going.
He resigned from his position. Resigned is a nice way to say he quit one step ahead of being fired.
Well, you did that a lot. A lot.
Someone in the booth is just being very spicy today. Herf resigned over a consensual relationship with a student.
Not like you.
That was not the reason I had to leave. Someone's being very spicy today. The student was an adult, a young adult, but over 18, and in a modern time, it wouldn't be such a huge thing, because what's the point of being a college professor if you can't shtup your students?
No, Dave.
This affair unraveled Herf's life. His wife left him, his father disowned him, she took the children, and Herf moved to Houston, where he briefly lived the life of an out gay man, though he did date a young woman whose family heard about Herf's other romantic interest and forbid her from seeing him. This was in 1965 in Houston, and it was still too early for the freaky life down south. He taught at another college and worked in the Houston music scene, but eventually lost that job because, well, you guessed it, he was stooping another student.
Keep it in your pants over there.
Around 1970, Herf's life took a turn. His father's death, his failure to become a professional musician, the pressure of living in a fucked up society that thought he was a pervert simply for loving the people he loved, caused Herf to have a bit of a mental breakdown.
Allegedly.
Details are sketchy, but some say Herf committed himself. Others say that Herf was committed against his will, and still others say he was never treated for any mental illness. But circumstantially, it seems pretty clear that he was in some sort of clinical setting, because that's where Marshall Herf Applewhite, a.k.a. Doe, met Bonnie Lou Nettles, a.k.a. T. Bonnie Nettles was a nurse, and exactly how she and Herf connected is intentionally obscure, because there's a very good chance that they met while Herf was in treatment for his mental health.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Bonnie was a wife, a mother of 4, a registered nurse, and by all accounts had that kind of happy, middle-class, suburban white lady life so often championed by the kind of people who believe that all women secretly yearn to be emotionally, intellectually, and sexually unfulfilled to this very day.
Well, you know how the Republicans are.
I will let the New York Times from 1997 take it from here. Quote, as an adult drifting from her Baptist upbringing, she would conclude that she had been born at other times as well, though all those lives preceded this one. Her husband, a businessman, was not so convinced. Their marriage of 23 years had been a gradual will, but what seemed to bring it to dissolution in 1972 was an overpopulation of spirits. Not only was Brother Francis, the long-dead monk, loyally at Bonnie's side, but she also called on other deceased souls through mediums. On Wednesday nights, the Nettles' living room was kept as dark as her circle group made still more connections with the beyond. Not surprisingly, Mrs. Nettles felt like something of an outsider in what passed for normal society, unquote. Bonnie was one of those folks in the late 60s and early 70s that we called seekers, and when Bonnie went searching, she found the occult. To be sure, there were spirits, seances, tarot readings, but there was also crystals, mystic energies, extraterrestrial entities, and of course, astrology.
Why wouldn't it be?
Because if you're going to go for the bullshit base package, you definitely want to splurge for the astrology add-on. So she met good old Herf, and she was primed and ready to jump aboard the crazy train. And when Herf met Bonnie, probably while undergoing some sort of treatment for mental illness, Herf was also going back to the Times, quote, at the same time, he found old answers no longer satisfactory for new spiritual questions. He had dipped into some trims of the time, the teaching of mystics, lone retreats into the desert, the literary science fiction of Robert A. Heinlein and Arthur C. Clarke. He now believed that UFOs were the objects people had once taken to be angels. His friend Mr. Parker said an overwhelming notion about heavenly connections had entered his head, perhaps caused by stress or some genetic chemical time bomb, or a combination of both. In this frame of mind, many psychiatrists say Mr. Applewhite was vulnerable to paranoid disorders. You think? Sometimes a person who cannot handle reality makes up a new one, restoring self-esteem with a vainglorious idea of being God's special deputy. Persuading others can then be an important part of sustaining the fantasy, unquote. It's important that I stop right here and say to you, dear pod friends, that in no way do I think Marshall Applewhite tricked Bonnie Nettles, or Bonnie Nettles tricked Marshall Applewhite, or that one brainwashed the other into some sort of crazy delusions. This is very much a case of
Wonder Twin Powers, activate!
In which Marshall assumed the shape of a messianic cult leader, and Bonnie took the form of a batshit prophet of a fucking alien religion. This was two totally, deeply dysfunctional people finding each other and emerging as one big crazier entity when they tapped their rings together. There would be no Heaven's Gate without each of these two people meeting and combining their craziness. And as we shall see, Bonnie was the lesser of two crazies, but no one would know that for about 25 years until people started mixing applesauce with vodka and barbiturates. It did not take long for Herf and Bonnie to decide that they were touched by some greater power. What greater power?
You know, the usual.
What you need to understand about the theology of Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles was that it was, at its core, a Christian theology.
What about the alien spawn, sir?
Let me try to explain. Both Herf and Bonnie were raised Christian. More to the point, Protestant Christian in mainline denominations in a time where mainline Christianity was the dominant cultural religion of this country. Neither had been trained in any real comparative religion, examining the differences and similarities of humanity's belief in the supernatural and or divine. Everything they believed was filtered through a homogeneous religious culture of the southern United States, particularly the southern religious culture of the 1940s, 50s, and early 60s. Every American cult, and I do mean every American cult, simply takes the basic story of Judeo-Christianity and adds or subtracts elements to create their personal mythology. Be they Joseph Smith with golden plates and an angel named Moroni, or Jim Jones swapping a debased version of Marxism and himself into parts of the Bible, or David Koresh just adding themselves to the Bible. Even L. Ron Hubbard simply edited some penny-a-word science fiction characters into the Bible and charged morons $1,000 a page to read it.
Damn, man, respect from a brother.
There is nothing in Heaven's Gate that is not analogous to or directly taken from Christian teachings, the Christian teachings that Herf and Bonnie grew up with. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to tell you about the next level or the evolutionary level above human or why there was a spaceship behind a comet, because if you have even a passing acquaintance with Christianity, you already know the story. But if you need like a nut graph, I'll give you one from Wikipedia. Quote, Applewhite and Nettles pondered the life of St. Francis of Assisi and read the works by Helena Blavatsky, R.D. Lang, and Richard Bach. They kept the King James Bible and studied passages from the New Testament focused on Christology, aestheticism, and eschatology. And Applewhite also read science fiction, including works by Robert A. Heinlein and Arthur C. Clarke. By June, Applewhite and Nettles' beliefs had solidified. They had concluded that they had been chosen to fulfill biblical prophecies and that they had been given a higher level minds than other people. They wrote a pamphlet that described Jesus' reincarnation as a Texan, a veiled reference to Applewhite. Furthermore, they concluded that they were the two witnesses described in the book of Revelations and occasionally visited churches or other spiritual groups to speak of their identities, often referring to themselves as the Two or the UFO Two. They believed they would be killed and then resurrected and, in the view of others, transported onto a spaceship. This belief will be quite pertinent later on in our story. This event, which they referred to as the demonstration, was to prove their claims. And to their dismay, these ideas were poorly received by other religious groups, unquote.
Can't imagine why.
After trying their new revelation out in various Texas communities, the two, as they began referring to themselves, and then they started calling themselves T for Bonnie and Doe for Applewhite.
That's from a song.
Went on the road. Bonnie, by the way, completely abandoned her 4 children to head out on the highway with her spiritual twin. And though theirs was indeed a spiritual relationship, because to the best of anyone's knowledge, they never did,
Coitus, the beast with 2 backs.
Their chaste relationship would form the nucleus of what would become Heaven's Gate in later years. And unlike so many other cults of the 70s, fucking was not the central tenet of the faith. It was, as we shall later see, antithetical to the very idea of what the group believed, which, if you think about it for just like a second, a middle-aged white woman and a self-loathing gay man who both considered their lives ruined because of sex, in Bonnie's case, a husband and 4 children, and Applewhite's because his life's ambition of music because he couldn't keep his dick out of his students. Yeah, you can see why they realized that maybe sex wasn't working out so well for them. On the road, T and Doe would begin to assemble the group that would arrive at their final destination in San Diego some 20-odd years later. They traveled the country, not surprisingly the west coast of the country, which has long been the fertile ground for lunatics with a message.
I mean, look at Ronald Reagan, right?
They swept through the goofier communities, attending UFO seminars and posted classified ads in the newspaper.
I'm afraid I am not familiar with that name.
Classified ads were kind of like social media posts that you paid for so like-minded lunatics could find you or, buy your Buick. They gained their first follower in 1974, but she left them 2 months later to rejoin her family. Probably because there was no drugs and no fucking going on. T and Doe dabbled in theft and credit card fraud because getting the cult off the ground required capital, and they lacked it, but never caught serious problems from the law. Who met them decided that a middle-aged couple of lunatics were probably mostly harmless and let them go. Their biggest success came in Waldport, Oregon, and when in 1975 they managed to convince a group of 20 UFO believers to abandon everything and come along with them, the two, as they chased down the mothership that would lift them up to the next level. This particular incident made national news. Walter Cronkite had it on CBS Evening News, and I went looking for it, but it was a little obscure. So instead, I'm going to play this clip from HBO's documentary, The Cult of Cults, about Heaven's Gate, which I took a lot of background information on this from.
There was a short period of time when in isolation we went through an extreme awakening period. This is unimportant information. The only thing that's important is, can you shed humanness?
That's Marshall Applewhite, by the way.
And then hang on to your hat. Because from that point until the time you leave will be one major growth after another that will change you from a human into a member of that next level.
A matter of some months ago, those of us who were up here were sitting in a meeting similar to this, where you are, and listening to two individuals, a man and a woman, share some information with us. It's important to understand that you cannot die and achieve the level we're talking about. You cannot die and get to heaven. This level that we're speaking of is obtained only while you're alive and physically healthy in a way that you've never been alive before. We're not here to convince you of anything, but we know that there are a lot of people, at least some people, who are waiting for this information, and they will recognize it when they hear it.
Spoiler alert! That whole part about you can't achieve it if you die, we're more of a guideline, really. Over the next decade or so, T and Doe would spend their lives on the road with a fluid group of believers in their wake. The two never really seemed to have grandiose visions of some great church like Jim Jones or aspiration to bilk their followers for their wealth like L. Ron Hubbard. A member of the group was free to leave any time they wished, though contact with their families was discouraged, if not forbidden. At one point in time, T and Doe sent their minions out to spend 2 weeks with their families as a test of resolve. Some came back, some didn't. They would even send some followers off on missions, often to make money for the group, working at fast food or odd jobs, or just sometimes to see if they would come back, which was difficult coming back because they moved around without leaving a forwarding address a lot.
Lieutenant, contact Starfleet Command.
When the mission members came back, the group was gone. For a while, they lived in what they called a star base.
Bunch of goddamn nerds.
Where they built communications facilities in the woods consisting of largely stacks of old tires and a black and white television, which they would watch Star Trek.
The original series.
Oh, God, no. By this time, it was the late 1980s, and the far superior Star Trek was the obsession of Heaven's Gate.
Next Generation?
Exactly. But I'm getting way ahead of myself because around the time the rumors began spreading of a new captain of the Enterprise, a much darker timeline was beginning for the members of the next level, the followers of T and Doe, the true believers, the Heaven's Gate, who had stuck with Herf and Bonnie through all the weird shit and come together in what at the time was a bug shit crazy cult, but not all in all a dangerous cult. Many of their families did not understand what their loved ones were doing, but they all kind of acknowledged that their loved ones seemed healthy, happy, and, not doing drugs or fucking everything that moved, which was pretty much a step up from every cult that sprang up in the 1970s. However, things were about to change. Because the two, T and Doe, were getting ready to face the harsh realities of being born into this human flesh. Because T was about to be brewed, strained, and drank down to the dregs by cancer, bringing us back to Doe, who fucking lost his goddamn mind. And that is where we will pick up next week with how things went very, very, very wrong. Is there lopping off of balls?
Sadly, yes.
So join us next week for part 2 of Packing a Purple Shroud, the story of the Heaven's Gate cult.
Hey, this is Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast, here to help you make the most of your summer with Michelob Ultra, a superior light beer worth playing for. Play for it with the guys when you're competing to see who can sink more birdies on the golf course, because winning tastes even better with Ultra on the line. Play for Ultra. Fill your fridge with Michelob Ultra this summer. Enjoy responsibly. Copyright 2025 Anheuser-Busch Michelob Ultra Light Beer, St. Louis, Missouri.
Brace the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started today at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
All I'm saying is, what could any American possibly have to offer an advanced alien civilization? Taco Tuesday?
The following podcast contains
profanity, food jokes, and tired comedy references.
Explicit language.
Hello and welcome to the podcast that asks a simple question. When you made your travel plans based on something you heard on Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell, what the hell were you thinking? I'm your host, Dave Bledsoe, and this is episode number 443, the Hail Bop, Hail Bop edition of the show, where we talk about the departure of the away teams in part 2 of Packing His Purple Shroud, the end of Heaven's Gate. Stay tuned. What the Hell You Think podcast is brought to you by Arts Intergalactic Tours, your getaway to the heavens. Are you struggling to find the perfect getaway for your group, looking to book passes for a long-term adventure for your congregation or church assembly, and need the best prices on package deals to the great beyond? Then look no further than Arts Intergalactic Tours. We provide discount rates to anywhere in the known universe for parties greater than 5. From a loop around the Pleiades to a slow voyage around the Crab Nebula, Arts Intergalactic can help you plan, book, and depart for the interstellar reaches with the best prices this side of Wolf 359. When it's time to leave the Earth behind, book passage with Arts Interstellar Tours.
From the high desert and the great American Southwest, I bid you all good evening, good morning across all these many time zones. It's going to be a very, very exciting show this morning. So buckle down and get ready. A lot of surprises coming up. I'm Art Bell, and this from the Tahitian and Hawaiian Island chains in the west, eastward across this great nation, to the Caribbean and the U.S. Virgin Islands, south into South America, north well to the pole, and worldwide on the internet. This is Coast to Coast AM. Great to be here. In a moment coming up, we've got a very special program. Ahead of that program, though, I do have some announcements, some things that I've got to get done here. Professor Courtney Brown is going to be my guest. He is a remote viewer, and he has some of the most exciting news that a person can imagine. And with respect to that news, or part of it, just part of it, there is a new and worrisome photograph of the comet Hellbop.
You know, I used to be quite the world traveler back in my youth.
Oh, here he goes again.
Man, in those days, I was considered what you might call me a jet setter. If the jets in question were all ungainly gray aircraft designed to carry large amounts of troops and cargo into war zones.
Sounds posh.
I assure you, it wasn't. There were 3 major cargo planes that the U.S. of AF used to haul us sad sons of bitches they were sending to some shithole that didn't want us there, and honestly, we didn't want to be there. The biggest and most comfortable was, of course, the C-5 Galaxy, a behemoth of a plane that looked like someone took a whale, bolted on wings, and shoved jet engines under the flippers. And when you took a look at it, all you could think was,
Seriously? That thing flies?
I mean, it did, not gracefully, but you could shove a shitload of troops and cargo on one. Now, the next was the venerable C-141, a more traditional-looking plane. If you squinted, you could imagine it could be like a discount airline.
Spirit Airlines is now boarding group whatever.
The problem with the C-141 was that it was old. It was old when I was in the service, and that was 30 years ago.
Why are you so old?
Yeah, trust me, I'm not thrilled about that either. People went to Vietnam on those goddamn planes, and they were the same planes I was taking to the Persian Gulf in the 1990s. You know, as old as the 141 was, it was still infinitely superior to the 3rd most common form of airlift I experienced, the KC-135 Stratotanker, which was, and still is, a flying gas station.
Fill her up, Howard.
Not only was that plane much older than the 141, it was only tangentially a cargo plane, meaning that you and all the cargo were crammed above 200,000 gallons of jet fuel. By comparison, a 747 fully loaded only carries 60,000 gallons of jet fuel. And that meant that you, the unwilling passenger, were riding on an extraordinary large amount of very flammable liquid in the event of an unexpected gravity incursion.
Planes crash. People die.
But that wasn't the worst part of flying on a KC-135. The absolute worst part was there were no seats on the goddamn plane.
So they were just standing there?
I mean, yes, well, there were technically seats. They were called jump seats. There were these, like, canvas and webbing benches that ran along the side of the plane. And let me tell you something. If you think the aisle seat in a crowded coach class is uncomfortable, spend 10 hours sitting on a fucking lawn chair with a brutal hangover and having to piss in a bucket.
No, I can get us a discount on Spirit Airlines.
But at least it had jet engines. I mean, one time I flew across the Gulf of Mexico in a propeller-driven C-130 right around the edges of a tropical storm, puking my guts out the entire way, and that made the KC-135 seem like flying on the fucking Concorde. So I guess what I'm saying is the reason I don't fly much these days is that I've got some pretty serious cargo plane PTSD. But you know what? At least I didn't have to kill myself to get a ticket on one. That tangent brings us to this week's topic. The second part of Packing a Purple Shroud, the Heaven's Gate story. When we last left Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles, they had gathered a small group of believers and were living in the fucking woods pretending to build alien communication devices out of stacks of old tires.
Oh, that's hyperbole.
No, that is something they really did. They said it was a kind of team building exercise, but they were literally building star bases in state parks across the United States out of mud and old tires. This is the group, in their own words, taken from the still active heavensgate.com. Quote, an away team from the evolutionary level above human, an admiral and his captain and crew, during the 1920s to the 1950s, picked and prepped the human bodies which they would wear for the task we are about to describe. They came into these bodies in the 1970s, the admiral and the captain first. They began by rounding up their crew in 75 and assisting them in the process of entering and taking charge of their own assigned human bodies. They called the crew together by means of a public statement and meetings over a 9-month period. The media, typically hastily judging them, tagged them a UFO cult because of their expectation of leaving aboard a spacecraft UFO at the completion of their task. The two then took the ones who followed them into seclusion, completely separate from the world for almost 17 years, not only completing their awakening or adjustment to their human bodies, but in this primitive civilization, but they also took them through a metamorphic classroom experience of changing over their consciousness and behavior to match with that of their distant culture from whence they had come. Unquote.
That's nothing but gibberish.
Yeah, well, welcome to the mind of Marshall Applewhite, so what the fuck can I tell you? Now, this seclusion is when the group, roughly about 24 people, spent their hours in the woods training their minds and bodies for the evolutionary level above human.
And that is?
Like I said last week, the core theology is just Christianity with some sci-fi tossed in, and this group was kind of like an order of monks living aesthetically and practicing various rituals to become closer to God, for lack of a better word. And the way they believed that they would become closer is by transforming into a kind of angel, which to their way of thinking was the next step in human evolution. You're probably wondering,
Then how do we get there?
well, first of all, you can't smoke, you can't drink, you can't do drugs, you can't have sex or even jerk off.
Yeah, I think I'll pass on that.
Also, you had to stop eating food that tasted good. Seriously, food for them was just fuel for these annoying human vessels, and you ate just enough to keep it functioning, but it could not at all be flavorful, just nutritious.
You guys big Guy Fieri fans?
Next, you have to disassociate yourself with all human connections, meaning all the people from your human life, like your parents, your siblings, your friends, your bartenders, all got to be cut off from contact. One of the reasons they were out in the fucking woods was to get as far away from the people in their human lives as possible. And then next, you had to train your mind to think on the next level by using ritual and behaviors designed by T and Do. These sound more sinister than what they were. They were mostly just rote tasks performed in an exacting manner as dictated by the two. And to their credit, they also did these boring-ass mundane tasks as well. They weren't damaging or dangerous. They were just tedious and repetitive, intentionally so. The idea was to reprogram how you thought. They were specifically designed to identify and eliminate impulses, particularly sexual impulses, were antithetical to the ascension to the next level. Members would be paired off with one another in order to monitor and assist each other in overcoming the limitations of their human vehicle. And failure wasn't exactly punished, but if you slipped up, there were rituals to help you when you failed. Nothing physical, but generally rehabilitative, at least in the eyes of the group. It's important to understand that being in this group was voluntary, and any member was free to walk away at any time. Other cults would coerce members into staying by keeping their money, their IDs, or using emotional or physical manipulation. But T and Do designed their cult to get people to intentionally leave, if nothing else, out of sheer boredom and horniness.
Bored, hungry, horny.
At one time, the group had as many as 70 acolytes, and through this winnowing process, they pared it down to roughly the 40 or so of true believers that would go on to ascend in 1997. To understand this group dynamic, you need to understand T and Do, Applewhite and Nettles. Applewhite was the speaker who interpreted and explained the messages from the next level, and Nettles was the mystic, the connection to the next level, who received their signs and instructions and revealed them to Applewhite, who would then create the dogma and doctrine based on this information. The two were, according to them, one mind, shared and enlightened in their togetherness.
And I remember thinking they were crazy.
This would be an accurate summation of the situation. However, the two balanced out each other's crazy into a fairly benign level of lunacy. That was until the early 1980s.
Reagan.
I mean, it's kind of similar. I mean, it was a cancer. In 1983, Bonnie Nettles lost an eye to cancer. This was hugely problematic for her and Applewhite.
The eye patch is flesh colored to make people less uncomfortable.
No. It was because cancer did not fit into the messaging the next level had been passing on to them for nearly a decade. Nettles refused to do any kind of treatment for the cancer aside from having the eye removal, and she believed that she couldn't die because the next level had told her so.
Second opinion, please.
That second opinion arrived about 2 years later when Bonnie Nettles died in Dallas's Parkland Hospital with Applewhite by her side.
Like JFK and Jackie O.
She died from liver cancer. Marshall Applewhite told the rest of the group that T's broken down vehicle had been discarded and she had ascended to the next level to prepare the way for their eventual ascension. But with his other half gone, Applewhite began to veer into some darker places. And I guess this is as good a time as any to bring up the procedures.
Oh, come on, Donnie. They were threatening castration.
Quoting now from the New York Times, quote, "The group had occasionally discussed the procedure. From a practical point of view, Mr. Applewhite could see its merits after all. It's commonly done on animals other than humans. Still, he hesitated to grant his approval. Too worried about someone going to the police and saying, 'Look what they made me do,' Sawyer said." Sawyer was one of the groups. But over the course of a few years, Sawyer and the other men tried hard to convince Applewhite. This was really no different than the olden days when manservants to the Queen would be castrated so they couldn't try anything. And finally, Mr. Applewhite agreed to inquiries be made. American doctors routinely said no, but a surgeon's assistant in Mexico was willing enough. And in 1993, Stephen McCarter, perhaps the group's most gung-ho disciple, won a coin flip against Sawyer and began the first to have his testicles removed. The operation, which is not complicated, was nevertheless botched. Just pause here for every man listening to grab his crotch and wince. Now you're going to want to hold on. Mr. McCarter's scrotum failed to drain appropriately and resulted in massive swelling.
I'm out. Okay, I'm not playing.
In the years ahead, Mr. Applewhite and 7 others were castrated. By then, Sawyer, feeling compelled to do some thinking while the outside the group had left. Presumably, he said, they went ahead after finding a better doctor to do it, unquote. So, yeah, that happened, and it almost certainly wouldn't have if Bonnie Nettles had still been alive. And this was just one way that shit was starting to get a little grim around the group campfires every night. This is the part of the show where we talk about the bummer shit, so I'm going to try to make it quick. While Bonnie Nettles was alive, the group was working on a literal interpretation of ascension, meaning an actual spaceship would appear on Earth and took their physical earthly body on board where it would be transformed into the next level. After Bonnie died, Herf started asking,
what if it doesn't?
With Bonnie already ascended, i.e. dead, what if the way to the next level wasn't so much that they would,
Beam us out.
But, they had to shed this physical body entirely, and so he adjusted his theology accordingly?
Forget it. No more beaming.
Wikipedia sums up the shift, quote, according to Heaven's Gate, once the individualist perfected himself through the process, there were 4 methods to enter or graduate to the next level. There was physical pickup onto a TILA, TILA is their acronym for the evolutionary level above human spacecraft, and transferred to a next level body aboard that craft. In this version, a UFO version of the Rapture, an alien spacecraft would descend to Earth and collect Applewhite Nettles and their followers, and their human bodies would be transformed through biological and chemical processes to perfected beings. Then there was natural death, accidental death, or death from random violence. Here, the graduating soul leaves the human container for a perfected next-level body. Then there was outside persecution that leads to death. After the deaths of the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas, and the events involving Randy Weaver at Ruby Ridge, Applewhite was afraid the American government would murder the members of Heaven's Gate. The American government did not know, and even if they had, would not have given a shit about these 39 seekers. Try not to be denigrating. Finally, going back to the text, there was a willful exit from the body in a dignified manner. Near the end, Applewhite had a revelation that they might have to abandon their human bodies and achieve the next level as Jesus had done. This occurred on March 22nd and 23rd, when 39 members died by suicide and graduated, unquote. This little theological adjustment took the better part of a decade to make happen. And in that time, the group emerged from their seclusion, began to formulate their doomsday theory, and send it out to warn the rest of humanity of its impending doom. They did this by classified ads, the time-honored way of leaving printed pamphlets in bus stations, and this new thing called
Welcome to the Revelation Superhighway.
This was a busy time for the group. Due to the sudden inheritance by one of their members, their money troubles always a thorny issue for them since their isolationist lifestyle was not conducive to a 9-to-5 grind. But with this influx of cash and the group learning to code HTML for clients for the kind of websites that pretty much look like
.geocities.com/monk fan page,
they were able to live rather better than they were before. This included renting a mansion in San Diego. And from there, they did what we all did in the 90s, made our own webpage where they informed us, again from heavensgate.com, quote, the Earth's present civilization is about to be recycled, spaded under, in order that the planet might be refurbished. The human weeds have taken over the garden and disturbed its usefulness beyond repair. The human kingdom was designed, created as a stepping stone between the animal kingdom and the evolutionary kingdom level above human, the true kingdom of God. It is the soul that can progress from the human kingdom to the kingdom level above human. Both kingdom levels have their own unique physical containers, bodies, for the souls that reside in that kingdom level, unquote. Which, I mean, no one read that because this was back in the days when you just posted some shit for a few of your friends and hoped that they would share it with a few of their friends and,
It was so good, I told 2 friends about it. And they told 2 friends. And so on, and so on, and so on.
Eventually reaching a couple of dozen people or so, most of whom you already knew. It's basically the same marketing strategy this podcast has used for 9 years to get the dozens of listeners we have today.
Great job, guys.
But hey, with Seltzer Kings on our side, we're hoping to hit, higher double digits. I mean, we can lop off a few of those Danny and Mike listeners with tales about botched castrations and military aircraft that have no relation to anything their listeners have ever experienced. I don't know. We're doomed. And then, well, one thing leads to another. And before you know it, this happened.
Hello? Yes, I need to report an anonymous tip. Who do I talk to?
Okay. This is regarding what?
This is regarding a mass suicide, and I can give you the address.
The address seemed the unlikeliest of places, a mansion in a quiet, affluent suburb of San Diego.
I mean, it was all very meticulously planned, which lets you know that Marshall Applewhite had thought about how this was going to go for a long time. And over 3 days, the members of the group assisted each other in their transition. I mean, they had gone out for a little bit of fun before the end times. They bought new shoes, new clothes, some spiffy purple sheets that they wore like shrouds, and they had a breakfast skillet at Denny's.
Whoa, big fella. That's not what skillets are for. Come on, move those paws.
Denny's has these big new breakfast skillets starting at $3.99.
Like the tasty farmer skillet, the garden fresh skillet, and the meat lover skillet. Right up your alley. Now, what have we learned?
It's better to eat from a skillet.
Right.
Then hit you with it.
Ouch.
Okay, technically they went to Marie Callender's, but I thought Denny's was funnier, and I'm pretty sure most of you don't know who Marie Callender's was. It was a restaurant, and they make really good frozen pot pies that you can buy in your grocery freezer case. Where was I? Oh, yeah. So they went out to dinner, and then they all went back to the mansion. They dressed in their away team uniforms, and they pieced the fuck out with some applesauce vodka and a shit ton of phenobarbital. In a particularly 90s piece of information, the group got this recipe for their suicide solution from the internet, probably from a Usenet forum with a fucked up name like Rec Humor Suicide Solution. I'm not even going to try to explain Usenets to you right now. That's a whole show by itself. 39 human beings with families and friends killed themselves because they thought a UFO was going to pick them up as it hid behind a comet. And look, this shit wasn't even Art Bell's fault.
My guest is Dr. Courtney Brown, Professor Courtney Brown. And I will endeavor to tell you a little bit more about him in a moment. We received a photograph from an amateur astronomer in Houston, Texas. As a matter of fact, I'll read you the facts very briefly. Urgent Art, strange objects sighted near Hale-Bopp. Art, I have just taken some amazing photographs of Hale-Bopp. They show a Saturn-like object near the comet. This thing, if it's solid and near the comet, would be about 4 times the size of Earth. I've called Hoagland. He says there have been other calls about this strange thing that just showed up tonight.
Admittedly, Art was peddling some very tenuously sourced bullshit by some absolute hucksters with zero reputation for credibility and was actually just, talking out of his ass. Art had airtime to fill. He was talking to some jackoff like me who was sitting in a truck drinking coffee and giggling at 3 a.m. He didn't know that a group of people who thought it was a good idea to lop their balls off was looking for a reason to punch out. And so, this little piece of information was how America came to grips with the last vestiges of the 70s cult movement, and America handled it in a very mature and responsible way.
ABC News Nightline, reporting from Washington, Ted Cowell. Good evening and welcome to a very special edition of Nightline where we're following a truly extraordinary breaking story. We're all familiar by now with the story of Marshall Applewhite and the Heaven's Gate cult, 39 lost souls following a deranged Pied Piper to an untimely end, or so it seemed until 2 days ago, when ABC News began receiving strange microwave transmissions from deep space, with the help of NASA scientists at 11 this evening, we were able to decipher these signals. And so now, live via satellite from the alien spacecraft is cult leader Marshall Applewhite.
The SNL skit was not that bad, and Will Ferrell was hilarious as Marshall Applewhite, but they took it too far when, right after Rob Lowe's monologue, they ran a spoof commercial for Keds shoes in which they used actual fucking footage of the dead Heaven's Gate members focusing in on their Nike shoes. I know I've made some pretty tasteless jokes in this series, but even I have to draw the line of using the images of actual dead people to mock their death for very cheap jokes. I mean, Letterman, he went too far as well when he did a top 10 list, signs you're in a bad cult. And Leno, as you can imagine, was all over this like stink on shit. But when you think shit, you think Jay Leno.
Why don't you tell us how you really feel?
No, I do. I refer you to episode 436.
That's a plug.
This did not go unnoticed at the time. The Deseret News wrote, quote, "But I'm the only one who's put off with the late night one-liners aimed at the Heaven's Gate cult. Hearing Jay Leno, David Letterman, Conan O'Brien, and Bill Maher joke about the poor misguided souls who took part in that methodical mass suicide conjures up a sense of deja vu. And I felt the same way about O.J. Simpson jokes during and after his criminal trial and civil trials. In both situations, people were killed. To me, this is a tragedy, not a comedy," unquote. And Joshua Molina, not the famous Joshua Molina, I checked, wrote in the Ohio State University Lantern in 1997, quote, "It's funny how pop stars like Kurt Cobain could put guns to their heads and be revered as cultural icons who died far too young, but when 39 people who were waiting to catch a next UFO into a new galaxy killed themselves, they're stigmatized as freaks. Their deaths should be mind-boggling, puzzling, and worthy of inspiring people to want to learn more about these types of people. I hate to think that if I got wrapped up in some group and let them control my life to the point where I lost all sense of reality, that after I died, people were cracking jokes about my death. These people were confused and delusional. That doesn't mean their lives didn't mean anything or that they were less than anyone else's," unquote. And the LA Times wrote about it 20 years later, quote, "Gallows humor has long been a way for people to deal with tragedies, to give themselves some distance and relief from the horror. But with Heaven's Gate, there may have been something else at work," according to Benjamin Zeller, a associate professor of religion at Lake Forest College near Chicago, and the author of 2014's book about the cult. "In some ways, I think it was too close for comfort," he said. "Too close because many of the beliefs that the group members held are similar to those found in more mainstream religions. Belief in a heavenly father, belief in the importance of the soul over the body, belief that they were engaged in an eternal fight of good versus evil, belief in salvation and an afterlife somewhere up there, belief in the end times. It's too easy to just dismiss them as nuts," unquote. I mean, they were nuts, absolute loonies. They'd lost all connection to reality and sincerely believed that a spaceship was going to magically transport them to heaven. And the only way they could get on that spaceship is to drink a suicide smoothie in a San Diego mansion. This is not the behavior of rational human beings. But what's different here than, say, Jonestown or Waco is that no one forced them to do it. You can watch their exit interviews, the videos they made before they killed themselves. They all knew and understand that they were going to die, and they stated clearly that they were doing it of their own free will. You could argue that Marshall Applewhite had spent the last 20 years brainwashing them, but I don't see it that way. Each and every one of this cult was a sad, broken person who had found something in this group of like-minded lunatics that made their lives have purpose, that made them feel like something had meaning, and to them, it was worth their mortal lives to reach a paradise, and I can't blame Marshall Applewhite from that, because that shit comes from churches, temples, and mosques, from millennia of religion and religious indoctrination that all teach that our lives on this world, on this planet, on this plane of existence are intrinsically worthless, and our only reward for the sheer fuckery of being born can only come after we are no longer alive. And pod friends, as a philosophy, that is deeply, wickedly, and cruelly fucked up. Like I said, I'm an atheist, so I like it for the clean, clear, simple message it carries. This shit is all you got. Good and bad from the moment you slid out your mom's hoo-ha to that little pinpoint of light when your brain shuts down forever from oxygen starvation. That is all you will ever have. The moral imperatives that govern an atheist behavior is based entirely on being trapped in this flesh puppet with 7 billion other flesh puppets just trying to make it from the one end of birth to the other end of death. And that goes a lot easier if we try not to be total dicks to each other.
Maybe I should start a religion.
Okay.
And hey, if it helps you personally to believe that there is some great afterlife where you go when you croak, where all your pets are waiting for you, fuck you, man. Go for it. I don't give a shit. But again, not being a total dick to each other calls for tolerance. I don't hate religions or religious people. I mean, I hate it when they use their religion to tell other people what to do and how to live, but that has nothing to do with the religion. That is all about them being, total dicks. But I will tell you this, no matter what you believe and how strongly you believe it, you got to pay attention to anyone, be they a podcast host, a pope, or a preacher, and especially some bug-eyed, bowl-cut Uber nerd who are telling you that they, and they alone, have some big insight to the great beyond, because they don't know anything more than what you know. Ask yourself this one simple question. Why would God or aliens tell this person who claims to know it all this information and no one else? Because if God or the aliens want humanity to do or become something, they're not going to tell Herf and Bonnie in Houston. They're going to make the best TikTok ever and blast it into everyone's brain at the same time, because these are next level dudes. And also, and this is important, you can jerk off all you want. I mean, do it in private or do it with someone who wants to jerk off with you. But the gods or aliens aren't telling you not to jerk off because, you know what? They like to watch.
Then stroke it. Stroke it. Stroke it hard.
And finally, my last piece of advice. Keep your balls. Just hang on to them. No matter if they're causing you problems or whatever else is going on in your mind, keep your balls. Keep them. Eventually, you'll be glad you did.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso Virtual Coffee Machines. Ready to enjoy the bold flavors of barista-quality Nespresso iced coffee at home? Simply fill a glass with ice and press the brew button on your virtual pop machine to enjoy rich double espressos roasted to stand up even when chilled. Refreshingly bold iced coffee. Refreshingly easy to make at home. Visit Nespresso.com to shop now.
Jif peanut butter. It's that jiffing good, it doesn't really need advertising. So instead, enjoy the calming sounds of the ocean.
Jif. Ooh, it's that jiffing good. Get your Jif at Jif.com.
That is it for the show this week. Yes, I completely recognize that I spent 2 full episodes making jokes, but they were jokes about Herf and not his followers. And honestly, even the Herf jokes, they were pretty tame. At least I didn't use photos of the dead people for show art. The AI image generator wouldn't let me put a fat, red-headed, bearded man in with dead people. And also, I mean, I did cut a whole section about Art Bell in the comment, because one of these days I'm going to do a whole series about Art Bell, and that's going to be a big part of it. Even, I know you don't want me to do that, but I don't do this show for you. I do it for me. And on that note, rate and review us. Kick us $1 at patreon.com for What the Hell Podcast, because Daddy needs a new pair of discount Nikes. Check out the Seltzer Kings Discord server. There's a link in the show notes. I'm putting stuff over there. I mean, it's the same stuff I put up everywhere, but this is on Discord, which apparently matters. And do all the things Jeremy tells you to do in the closing credits. Otherwise, Jeremy will have me out building star bases out of old tires behind the Seltzer King Clubhouse in Paramus. Swing by if you're in the neighborhood. Danny and Mike are there.
That is a total lie.
Yeah, we don't actually have a clubhouse, and I don't actually. I keep asking for one for Jeremy to introduce me to them, but he keeps telling me no. And so for me, Dave, have you had so many relationships in this life? Only 1 or 2 will last, Bledsoe. Producer.
You go through all the pain and strife, then turn your back and they're gone so fast.
Gavin, and all the fictional Hanson brothers on this show, we want to say, in the end, they'll be the only ones there. And when you're old and start losing your hair, can you tell me who will still care? And that would be the next little aliens. And so, we'll see you all next week.
What the Hell Were You Thinking stars Dave Bledsoe and features Gavin St. James and several fictional minions.
The show is produced by Kimberly Steele and a part of the Seltzer Kings podcast network. You can find more information on the show on their website, whatthehellpodcast.com, or on Twitter at @thehell_podcast, or on Facebook as What the Hell Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I have no ending for this, so I take a small bow.
I don't know the story of Prince Charles and Lady Di.
Seltzer Kings
podcasts.